And she says, okay, the baby's head is right there. If you just get back in the water, I think she'll be out in just a few pushes. And just something in me, I just wasn't convinced. I just wasn't convinced. And as I'm saying to her, are you sure? I have this huge contraction. And I look at John right in his face. I just yell in his face, help me, I need help, please help me. And then the other midwife, not my main midwife, but the other midwife, Nicole, she kind of chuckles behind me and she's like, yeah, I think you're ready.
Welcome to the Happy Home Birth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things home birth and motherhood. Is it really safe to have hopes and desires for your birth? What if you plan, but things don't unfold the way you'd wanted? Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to this week's episode of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and this week we're speaking to Lindsey Fuller, a homemaker and former registered nurse living in Tampa, Florida. She's married to her husband, John, and they have three beautiful children. She loves spending her days devoted to raising her children and supporting her husband in his medical practice. We are going to hear how Lindsey's perspective on birth preparation changed over time and how her most recent birth truly brought her full circle. Now, before we jump in, I want to throw a little light on this episode's sponsor, Samaritan Ministries. It has been a dream come true to partner with Samaritan because I've been a member of this healthcare sharing organization for over 8 years. I've seen firsthand the blessings that have come with moving to a member funded health share, especially as a small business owner. Knowing that each month I am paying to help other members cover their medical bills gives me such a sense of integrated community. I love sending a personal note letting the family know that we're thinking of them and taking the time to actually pray for whatever is going on in their life. And when I've had a medical need, it's been a breeze to submit my information to Samaritan and experience the blessing of other members sending me money to help cover my bills. Community is so undervalued these days, but not at Samaritan. If you'd like to explore what a healthcare share looks like, I've got a link just for you in the show notes. Fill out the information, and a Samaritan team member will be in touch to answer any of your questions. As a thank you from me, you'll receive the first module of my childbirth education program, Happy Home Birth Academy, for free. Okay, let's jump into this week's episode. Please remember that the opinions of my guest may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And this show is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Lindsey, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Caitlin. I'm so excited.
Oh man, I'm so excited too. Just sitting here talking with you before we have even started recording. This is going to be such a fun episode, and you have so much to bring to the table. So, would you mind just starting off right now, introducing yourself and your family to the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Lindsay. I live in the Tampa Bay area in Florida, and my husband and I have been married for 7 years now, and we have three beautiful children. He's an orthopedic surgeon, and I help him run his practice. And by trade, am a registered nurse, but I primarily just help him and take care of our three beautiful children now.
Wow, that's amazing. What are their ages?
So my son is 5.5. My daughter turns 3 in 2 weeks. And my newest little addition, she is 4 months old.
Oh man, that's so fun. Those are just such great ages. Awesome.
It really is.
I can't wait to hear how all of this unfolded. So let's go back to your 5.5-year-old. Let's
Yes.
hear what life was like when you became pregnant with your son.
Yeah, so we were living in El Paso, Texas at the time, and my husband was in his 4th year of orthopedic surgery residency. That's a 5-year residency program. And we were just so entrenched in the medical world that I just went with OB care at the time. And during that time, people really kind of discouraged me from getting too attached to the idea of having a natural childbirth. But I really wanted a natural childbirth. After seeing on the other side of an epidural getting put in nursing school, I was like, absolutely not. I have no interest in that. Thank you very much. I will take the pain. Um, and so I was actually a little bit more afraid of getting an epidural than I was going through a natural childbirth. So I went with OB care and I ended up having a 12-hour labor and which wasn't bad. It was a back labor, so not the best situation. His position was a little wonky. But then I really didn't want to push on my back. I wanted to give birth in a different position, but I got so bullied in that process. And so I ended up pushing for almost 2 hours on my back, and I sustained a third-degree perineal tear. And that was so stressful for me. And the doctor that delivered him was not happy with me that I would not take Pitocin. Now, I had gone into labor naturally. I had gone through the whole labor without any medication, but she felt it was taking too long and she wanted to give me Pitocin and I refused. And I don't see how take a 12-hour labor for your first baby is taking too long. That seems like average, if not on the shorter side to me. But anyway, she seemed to not really like that was my answer to that. Whenever she came, he was born around noon, and whenever she came that evening to do her rounds in the hospital, she came in and she told me, "Oh, I've been telling all my other patients about you today because I was late to all my other appointments because I was with you." And so I was telling everyone, well, when you do it naturally, it just takes longer. And that just made me sick to my stomach because, first of all, I'm a nurse. So I'm like, this is a completely inappropriate thing to say to a patient. Like, this is horrible patient care. But then also, she was using my birth story and trying to use that to manipulate other moms and scare them into having a natural birth. And that really put a bad taste in my mouth, just a very inappropriate thing to say. And my husband made the point that that's kind of a violation of HIPAA too.
That's
Like
what I was thinking. Like,
you
wait a
can't
minute.
yeah, you can't like walk around telling about other patients.
This other girl, her name's Lindsay. She's in room
Yeah.
248. Real piece
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah. So that was my first labor and delivery experience. And then with my second birth, we had moved for my husband's fellowship. We were now in New Mexico. It's funny, all three of my children were born in different states, which I think is pretty cool. But I really wanted to have a home birth at that time, but for various reasons, it just wasn't an option. So I went with a group of certified nurse midwives that delivered in the hospital there. And they were good. They were supportive of the decisions that I made about my care. And the tough thing about that pregnancy was I ended up having 11 days of prodromal labor. And it was just a lot. It was a lot for me to deal with because I thought, oh, this isn't my first baby. I'll for sure know when I'm going into labor. And it kept feeling like it was starting. And then after hours, it would peter out. And so whenever I did finally go into active labor, the labor itself was only 3.5 hours. And that alone is a really fast labor. But because of the prodromal labor, I didn't really recognize that I was in active labor until I was only about an hour to an hour and a half away from delivering her. And so that created just a really stressful, rushed feeling experience. Like I couldn't mentally get ahead of the pain. And so I wasn't coping well with it. Like we were in the back seat of the car on the way to the hospital and my whole body was shaking. I didn't know that was a thing while women are in labor, that happens sometimes, that your body shakes, and that's normal, but it's a lot of hormones at once. And so my whole body's shaking and I'm just yelling in the backseat of the car, "Oh God, help me." And we get to the hospital. We barely made it to the hospital, but we get there and it's at a women's hospital. And so my husband didn't work there normally, so he'd never been there. And this one person like tries to put me in a wheelchair, and I'm like, absolutely not. I cannot possibly sit right now. So I was using my husband as a walker, and I like shoved him into the elevator. And once we got into the elevator to get up to L&D, I really couldn't take the pain anymore. And I fell down on my hands and knees in the elevator. And whenever the elevator doors opened up on L&D, I crawled onto the L&D floor. And as a nurse in my head, I'm like, oh, great. Now I'm the dramatic patient over here.
I just wish we had a video though. I
Oh
really
man,
would
I
love to
wish I
see
had a
it.
video of that. It was fantastic. And I guess somebody had called them from the first floor to tell them that I was coming because the charge nurse and my nurse were standing there like waiting for me. Like there's some girl like rushing up there right now. So luckily I did make it into a patient room before I pushed her out. Didn't have to do that like in the lobby area, thankfully. And I only pushed for 9 minutes with her on hands and knees, and I sustained a first degree tear with her. And part of the reason for that, I think the reason for that is when my water broke, the midwife saw that it was meconium stained amniotic fluid. And so she really said, you've got to push her out right now. That caused me to push against my natural feeling of when to push. So I mean, I'm thankful it wasn't another third degree tear, but that was difficult. And then hospital policy, whenever there's meconium stained amniotic fluid, they clamp and cut the cord and take the baby pretty quickly. Um, and gosh, that was almost 3 years ago, and it still gives me a lump in my throat to think about them taking her away from me right away. So I didn't get to see her until about 30 to 40 minutes after the birth because they just had her over in the warmer and they were suctioning her over and over again. And praise God for my L&D nurse. My the NICU nurse that was there said, "Okay, she's not adjusting well. We're going to take her to the NICU." But my labor nurse, who didn't even know me, like walked in and dropped the baby, she didn't even know me, but she advocated for me. She was a great nurse, and she said, "No, let's put her on her mama first and see how she adjusts then." And of course, she was fine then. She was fine.
Oh gosh, thank you. Like,
And I'm like, y'all could have done that half an hour ago. So, there's a lot that I'm very thankful for in my first two experiences. I was able to do them the way that I wanted to unmedicated. I didn't have to be induced, anything like that, but both of them had some traumatic elements. That I really wish had been different. And so that led me the third time around to really be set on doing a home birth. And it worked out well. Like we had moved to Florida around our family again, and I had the support system that I felt like I really needed to do that. So yeah, third birth story. I I think it would have been hard to convince my husband to have a home birth the first or second times. And he's said that before. He said, being a doctor, I just assumed that I could trust the doctors and the system. And I mean, the way he puts it is it was very humbling to see you get put on the conveyor belt that is obstetric care and just one thing after another not go as well as they could have gone. And
wow.
so he's a very intelligent, logical man. So whenever he saw that happen, he started looking into home birth and how safe it is. And whenever he found out, wow, this is a really safe option, and a lot of other countries are actually modeled this way, he was absolutely for it with the third birth. So I'm very thankful that I didn't have to do a whole lot of my own convincing with him.
Wow, that really is interesting, Lindsay, to think about how he's seeing, other doctors, people
Hmm.
like him in his
Yeah.
profession and thinking, "Oh, this isn't quite right." And,
Yeah.
I wonder how that also impacts, I'm sure I can't help but think that it does to some degree help him in his
Hmm.
medical practice, thinking like, oh, I'm not putting people on a conveyor belt. Like, that's
Right.
not the kind of care that I want to provide. That's not what I wanted for my wife. That's not what I want to provide to my patients. That's a kind of
Exactly.
interesting perspective to be able to hold.
Yeah, yeah, it was a very interesting dynamic for him because he's a very good-natured person and he naturally believes the best in people. And
Mm.
so it didn't occur to him that I would just kind of be treated like a number in obstetric
Wow.
care. And so yeah, yeah, I'm really thankful for his support as I transitioned to becoming a home birth mom.
So cool. Well, okay, so you decided to become a home birth mom. Were you already pregnant when you guys came to that conclusion, or was this before you got pregnant with your third?
This was before I got pregnant with my third, really after the whole situation with my second. The fact that we barely made it to the hospital really scared my husband. And so he was like, I didn't even think about the logistical aspect of this, that it might be better to stay at home because your labors are so quick. And so that's kind of what spurred us, that and the fact that they took our daughter from us. Those were the two events in the second birth that really spurred us to talk it through. So whenever I did get pregnant with our third baby, it was already decided that that's what we would go with. So,
Wow. That's
yeah.
amazing. Okay, so let's hear it. Let's hear how that pregnancy unfolded.
Yeah, so that pregnancy was a whoopsie. Um,
I think those are the
we
best.
those are the best. We were wanting to have a third child, but we weren't planning on having it trying for another baby for a few more months. My husband was doing some locums work, and so he was out of town every couple weeks. He'd be like in the month, he'd be out of town for 2 weeks, and then he'd be home for 2 weeks, and so that was just really, really difficult. And when your husband's gone for 2 weeks and then he comes home, sometimes there's a big celebration and you conceive a baby by accident.
Congratulations. It's very, it's
Oh
beautiful.
goodness. And the best part about that was I can really tell whenever I'm pregnant. Every time I've been able to tell at like 3 weeks pregnant. I just feel kind of like, something's different. So because of that, whenever how that timing lined up, he was about to leave to go on another locums job for 2 weeks whenever I started to have that feeling. And I had that feeling and I took a pregnancy test the day that he was going to leave. And it was a very, very faint positive. And I didn't tell him. I let him go. I let him go for 2 weeks because we hadn't been planning to have a baby. And I was like, I need to process this. So it was actually really beautiful whenever he came home. I had one of my friends help make this like paper poster thing that said, "Welcome to the hive of our family of five," and had bees on it. And I put the pregnancy test in front of that. And so he came home and I set it in the bathroom. And he came home late, so the kids are already asleep and everything. And he goes in the bathroom to change. And I had just thrown a baby shower for one of my friends. And he sees that and he thinks that it's like from the baby shower, right? And so he's looking at it and then he says, huh. He says out loud, like I'm kind of peeking in the bathroom to see if he's registering it. And he says out loud, huh, how many kids do Caitlin and Austin have? Wait, they don't have 3 kids. Wait, are you? And I said, John, do you see what's sitting in front of the paper right there? Men are so funny. They don't see what's right in front of their faces. And I was like, this is my positive pregnancy test. And he just, his face lights up. And then
Oh,
and then he's like, "Oh, but this is really faint. Are you sure it's positive?" Because I had just like set the first pregnancy test there. Well, while he was gone for 2 weeks, I took 4 more.
obviously.
And obviously, and so I pull those out of a drawer and fan those out in front of him. And I was like, yeah, it's positive, babe.
I'm positive.
I'm positive that it is positive. And so he was so excited. He was like, I have nothing to complain about in life. I now have 3 children. Um,
Oh,
so
wow.
it was so sweet. It was so sweet.
That's really beautiful. Also, I just gotta say, for you to be able to like keep quiet on something like that, like it's like out of the realm of possibility for me. I'm such an external processor. Like my
Yeah.
husband knows like 3 seconds after.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's so funny because I told a number of my friends, like people knew and he did not know. And he thought that was absolutely hilarious. I was like, "Oh yeah, and this person knows and this person knows." But I didn't tell any of our family or anything like that. And so that was very difficult to keep to myself, but I wanted to tell him in person, like I wanted
Yeah.
to see his face. And it was totally worth the wait because seeing his face light up whenever he
Oh.
realized that I was pregnant again, and especially because it wasn't at the planned time, you know. So the other two were a little bit more planned, so it wasn't as big of a surprise.
Right.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun to
Oh,
tell him
that's a
that.
really sweet Lindsay. Okay, all right. So you become pregnant. What's the rest of
Mm.
the pregnancy like? And what stood out to you in terms of midwifery care? How did that work?
Yeah, so the rest of the pregnancy, he did have to continue to do some locums work up until I think, about 6 months pregnant. So that did put an extra strain on this pregnancy that wasn't there in other pregnancies. But I have a really wonderful group of friends through my church here, and they were so supportive. Anytime that John was out of town, they were like, "We'll get you things. We're here for you." And I knew that. Some different things to help me deal with the pregnancy symptoms. You know, the first time I was pregnant and all of these symptoms started coming at me, I was like, what is happening to me? But I was more prepared this time. I knew how important magnesium and prenatal vitamins would be to help the leg cramps, and I knew how important protein intake was to help the nausea and things like that. So, um, yeah, having midwifery care was honestly just so nice. Like I would go, the midwife that I went with, I did need to go to her office for most of my visits, which was totally fine with me. They had it almost looked like it was in a home. They had all of these toys for my daughter to play with, and it was just a really chill experience to just sit down in the chair there and talk with them. It wasn't rushed. All of my appointments were 30 minutes to an hour, and I mean, I by the time I gave birth, I had a relationship with my midwife, you know, and that made me feel a whole lot more comfortable because like in the other two births, the OB that delivered my son, I had never met her before. And the midwife that delivered my daughter, I had never met her before. They were all part of practices that just sent whoever was on call. And, you know, I mean, whenever you're in a very vulnerable time in your life, you really want to be surrounded by people that you know and you're comfortable with. And that's a huge difference with home birth care than I saw even with midwifery care in the hospital, you know.
Right.
So that was good. The thing about my midwife, though, she lives 45 minutes from where I live. And I was like kind of nervous because she said, I think you're going to go fast this time. So you need to call me and let me know as soon as you feel like you're in labor. Well, that sounds easy,
Right.
but
No. Mm.
once you've dealt with prodromal labor before, it messes with your mind so much that you second guess everything, you know? And also, I didn't really want people like sitting around waiting for me to have the baby, you know? So that did make me kind of nervous. It ended up working out fine, but that was one element that I was like, oh man, I wish that there were more midwives in the area. But there just weren't a whole lot practicing in December. You know, a lot of people take more time off in December, so that was kind of difficult for me.
Mm. Wow.
Um,
Okay, so she's 45 minutes away. You've experienced prodromal labor before. I can,
a
I can see how that might be a little tough.
little stressful, a little bit of a puzzle to figure out there, but yeah, so Isla was due on December 18th. And interesting thing, for my previous two births, I went into labor on my due date and gave birth on my due date
Wow.
completely naturally. I don't know why it happened that way, but it did. And so because of that, that led a number of people in my life to really be convinced that this baby is going to come on her due date. And I kept telling people, that's not how it works. But I kind of fell a little bit prey to this because I did have things scheduled up through the week before the due date. And my husband had things scheduled up through December 17th.
He's really convinced.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I told him that is not a good idea. And he said, "Don't worry, I can easily move this." And so, it was just pretty comical. I really wanted my mom to come and help me prep and just kind of relax together before the birth. I wanted her to come at 39 weeks, but she was so dead set, "You are not having this baby until the due date," that she wouldn't come. And so I I was worried. I told her, "You realize that that means that you might miss the birth." Because from about 30 weeks on, I really felt in my heart this baby will come before her due date this time. And I think that that was just the Lord preparing my heart to make sure that I took personal responsibility and got ready what I need to get ready. Because that's the thing about home birth. You have to take responsibility and prep your space and everything. And I liked that. I preferred that much more. But um so I'm glad that I had that drive in me. Like I gotta get everything done. But yeah, so she ended up being born at 39 and 2. So my mom did miss the birth.
Oops.
Yeah. But honestly, she was a little uncomfortable with the idea of home birth. And so it's probably like in the long run ultimately better that I could just call her that morning and be like, "The baby's here and everything is fine." But I do wish that she could have been there. But yeah, so due on December 18th, and the week before that, it was December 8th on a Sunday. I'm looking through my calendar and I realized that I have something scheduled every day through Thursday. And I'm like, the earliest this baby could come and me not have to cancel anything is Friday. Oh, Friday's Friday the 13th. I don't want to have her on Friday the 13th. And so I was just kind of like, oh man, I hope that doesn't happen. But then I thought, this baby is going to be born in God's timing. It's going to be perfect just the way it happens. So I didn't really think much more about the whole Friday the 13th thing at that point. The week just kind of progressed as it needed to. On Tuesday, I did have some prodromal labor in the middle of the night. I had 4 hours of prodromal labor, and it got bad enough that the contractions were making me feel kind of nauseous, and I called my midwife to talk to her about it. But here's the thing. Wednesday, the next day, was my husband's last full day of clinic for the month, and all of his patient slots were filled. He was trying to see everybody and get them taken care of before the holidays, before he was going to go on paternity leave for a little bit. And I really admire that about him. He was trying to take care of everybody. But in my head, I'm like, it's like 2 in the morning on Tuesday night, and I'm like, I cannot have this baby. I cannot have this baby right now. He needs to see his patients. And, maybe that's what kind of psyched me out of going into labor. Who knows? But thankfully, that did peter out after like 4 or 5 hours. But the next day, I was absolutely exhausted. And so usually on Wednesdays, I would take my daughter to her dance class, and I could not even bring myself to do that. Like literally just driving her there. I didn't have to do anything except drive her there, but I couldn't bring myself to do that. So we just laid down and watched a movie and tried to rest that day. And I was thinking in my head, I've got to make it through tomorrow because on Thursday I had scheduled a school tour for a school that we were considering sending our son to next year. And I knew enrollment's going to open up in January. I'm going to have a baby in January. I cannot be trying to tour schools before that enrollment opens up at the end of January. I got to get this done now. So that was really important to me, and I was holding on to that. And luckily, by Thursday morning, I was feeling a lot better. And so me and John and our two kids go and we tour this school. And oh, Caitlin, it was a lovely day. It was such a beautiful day. I mean, December in Florida, in Central Florida, is never going to be super cold, but it was this nice breezy weather, beautiful sunshiny day. We really liked the school. I felt very at peace with it. And you know how essential to feeling at peace and settled is whenever you need to go into labor. So just keep that in the back of your mind that like everything's starting to kind of fall into place here. And so I was very happy about that. And we left the school, came home, and I called my dad, talked with him on the phone for a little while. I'm really close with my parents, so that's just always very therapeutic for me to talk to my parents on the phone. And then I got some cleaning done, and I cooked dinner, made like beef burritos, something very filling, And we put the kids to bed. And then I decided, okay, well, I've checked off the major things on my list that I needed to do before having this baby. And I decided I had planned on laboring in our bathtub. Our bathtub is this wonderful two-person bathtub, big soaker tub, and it's so funny. One of my other friends is a home birth mom here, and whenever she and her daughter came into my bathroom months before I got pregnant, her daughter said, "Oh, look, Mom, that would be great for a home birth." And she's like, "I like where your head is." So, yeah, I had planned on laboring and having the baby in the bathtub. So I had these beautiful red Christmas lights strung up around the bathtub, and I'd written on note cards some different scriptures and some poems by Charles Spurgeon. And I decided, you know what, I have time and I just got this new, like, pretty stationery. So let me transfer from the plain white note cards the scriptures that I had written down and put them on this pretty stationery and decorate the area that I want to give birth. And so I'm sitting in Isla's nursery that I had just finished decorating for her, and I'm writing all of these scriptures that I had specifically picked out to meditate on while I'm in labor. And I'm also listening to your podcast, to the Happy Home Birth podcast. And it was just so relaxing. And then I put those up around the bathtub, and my husband asked if I wanted to do anything before going to bed. And I told him, I want to watch How the Grinch Stole Christmas. The one with Jim Carrey, absolute classic.
It really is.
I I watch that every Christmas. And so we put that on. And I mean, at this stage of pregnancy, everything is sore. So John is like massaging my legs and my hips and my back, and I fall asleep while watching How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And I'll forgive myself in the future because I'll watch it every year. But I fell asleep and I woke up towards the end of the movie, finished watching the movie with him. Then I decided to just go to bed for the night. This was around like 11:15 at night. Um, and he still had some paperwork that he needed to do, so he went back out to the living room to work on his computer, and I went to bed. I woke up around 1:15 in the morning, and I realized the living room light is still on, and I'm like, man, this is really late for him to still be working on stuff. I sure hope I don't go into labor tonight because he's going to be exhausted and no help at all to me as a support person. So that was at 1:15 in the morning, and I fell back asleep. And then at 1:41 in the morning, not even half an hour later, I woke up with my first contraction
Oh boy.
because, God has a sense of humor. So I had had the prodromal labor a few nights before, so I was like, this might not even be the real deal. So it's fine. I'll just lay here and try to rest. And I tried to go back to sleep, but I just really couldn't go back to sleep. So I am just laying in bed and I'm praying through the contractions. And that lasted until about 2:30 in the morning. And then I just was so uncomfortable, I had to get up. And so I decided that I would look at my my handout sheet that my pelvic physical therapist had given me that has like the exercises you can do in the first stage of labor to open up the pelvis. By the way, I've told her since then that that's what I did, and she thinks it's hilarious. Like, what a good patient. You're like pulling out your handouts in labor, looking at what you should do. So I did some of those exercises, and I think it really did open up the pelvis because the contractions started to get harder and more frequent then. And I'm like, well, It's effective. Um, so I downloaded one of those contraction timer apps on my phone because I was like, okay, this is getting more intense. Let me see how often these are actually happening because it's kind of hard to judge on your own, you know. So I'm in our master bathroom and I'm leaning against the sink, timing one of the contractions. And when the contraction was over, I look around the bathroom. I hadn't turned on any lights, but it's so bright in the bathroom. And we have a skylight in our bathroom. And so I look up at the skylight and I'm like, oh no, that looks like a full moon. I'm definitely having this baby tonight. Definitely having this baby. And I see on my phone that it's Friday the 13th. And I'm like, well, look at that. Life has really come full circle. I have predominantly worked in trauma services as a nurse, and we always joke on trauma services, oh, the crazy patients come out on Friday the 13th and full moons. That's when they show up to the ER. And now here I was, the crazy patient. So So I honestly laughed out loud by myself in the bathroom then because I knew for sure this is it. I am definitely in labor right now. So that was gosh, about two, well, 3:30, 3:45 around that time. And I really couldn't labor by myself in the bathroom or the bedroom anymore. So I went ahead and went out to the living room. I wanted to turn on our Christmas tree and labor in front of the Christmas tree. And we have this lighted nativity scene. I wanted to turn that on and try to focus on those things to distract from the pain, you know? And so I knew whenever I went in the living room that it would wake up John. And I was like, okay, he's definitely had at least 2 hours of sleep. That should be sufficient. Let me just go ahead. Let me just go ahead and go out there and turn on the Christmas tree. And of course, that did wake him up. So I kind of brought him up to speed at that point and told him how often the contractions were and I was trying to sit on the labor ball. That's what I had done in my previous other two labors, and it was just so uncomfortable. I couldn't get in any good position, and that kind of told me it might be time to call the midwife and see what she has to say about this. And so at 4 in the morning, I called her and told her what was going on, and she said, "Okay, do you want me to go ahead and come right now?" But like I said, I didn't want people like sitting around waiting for me to have the baby, so I told her let me go get in the bathtub and see what happens because I knew if it's prodromal labor, it'll slow down in the water. But if it's real labor, nothing's gonna stop this. And so I told her I'll call you back after I've been in the water for a little bit. Well, I got in the water, had some really strong contractions. They really picked up a lot. And by 4:30, John was calling her back for me because I could no longer make the call. And she's very smart. She knew what was going on. So whenever we called at 4 o'clock, she went ahead, got up, took a shower, and got dressed. So whenever John called her, she said, "All right, I'm already ready. I'm getting in the car right now." So she had to swing by and pick up the second midwife that was going to be coming with her. They live really close to each other. So by 5:20, they both arrived at our house, and I was still in the water at that point. And I wasn't sure how I was going to tolerate laboring in the water. Whenever I was in labor with my second child, we lived in a different house and we had a large tub, but it wasn't nearly as big as the one we have now. And I was in the bathtub and I just hated it. Like I just could not stand the water. And so I really wanted to have a water birth. And my midwife said, you're probably less likely to tear if you're in the water. So, I really wanted to like that. And so I'm so glad that I did like it in this situation. And I think it was really very much about like the size of the tub. You know,
Absolutely.
I see why people that have regular sized bathtubs have to have a birth pool because that being able to move around is really essential because our tub is deep enough that I could be on hands and knees and still be pretty much immersed in the water.
Yep. See, that's what was with my first birth. I labored for a while in our tub, which is like It's such a goofy tub. It's wide. Like it's a
Hmm.
wide tub, but it just is so low. Like
Hmm.
even filled to say it were filled to the brim, it still would not cover my belly. So it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, that is the worst place in my mind where I labored.
Yes.
But the idea of having like a big soaking tub that like
Mhm.
fills up nice and high, that sounds divine.
Yes, yes. And the best thing about it being a tub instead of a birth pool is whenever the water started to get cold, I could just immediately drain it and run the faucet directly on my back whenever I needed to fill it up with some more water. So that was fantastic. And whenever I wasn't running the faucet, John was pouring cups of hot water on my shoulders. So that was really nice too. So the midwives arrived around 5:20 and they checked the fetal heart tones and they checked my blood pressure and asked, kind of how I was feeling and everything. She walked in and immediately was like, "Do you feel like pushing yet?" And I was like, "Not yet, Sarah, not yet." But, I mean, she and I were both nervous that she wouldn't make it. So that's why we were both kind of on high alert for that. But yeah, so it was really nice that she was able to check the fetal heart tones and everything while I was in the water. Like I was not disturbed in any way. Like she just reached down in the water and was able to check that. And so they went in the living room and sat down so that they wouldn't be just like staring at me while I'm in the tub, you know? And I labored with just John in the bathroom with me for probably about half an hour at that point. And my midwife kept like walking by the door and checking on me. She took some really beautiful pictures of John pouring water over my back with the red lights around me and everything. And those are some of my favorite pictures. I'm so glad she did that. And she came back in to check the fetal heart tones again at 6, and she asked me, when was the last time you peed? And I had gone to the bathroom before getting in the water at 4, but at this point it's 6. And so she says, I really think that you need to get out of the water, which is not what I wanted to hear. Get out of the water, go to the bathroom, try to pee, and have a few contractions on the toilet because I think that'll bring her down and you'll probably be ready to push her out then. And I had had toilet contractions with my other labors, and let me tell you, when she said that, I was not excited to go sit on dilation station. I was like, I know that those are very effective contractions, but please don't do this to me. So, she did convince me. I did get out of the water a few minutes after 6, and I went and sat on the toilet, peed, and I had like 3 contractions on the toilet. And she shared her labor notes with me, and it's so funny because I was coping really well in the water. But then on the toilet, of course, that was much more difficult. And she wrote in her notes that I was on the toilet and I was, quote, more verbal. And I'm like, that is the mildest way to say I was yelling. That was just the mildest way. And I so appreciate your decorum there, Sarah, putting it like that in your notes. So she's standing in the bathroom and she says, you sound like you're probably ready to push. But I don't know. I had never been in a setting where my care providers were confident in me. It was always where whoever was attending the birth wasn't very hands off. Even the nurse midwives in the hospital they felt like they had to take some control of the situation. So I as wonderful as the autonomy was, it was a new experience for me, and that was kind of scary. And so she said, I think that you're probably ready to push. Um, I can check you if you want, but I don't have to check you. And I've always had a big fear of getting a cervical lip from pushing too soon. So I was like, I do want you to just check, just tell me. And I had not had any cervical checks at all during the pregnancy, the labor, nothing. This was the first cervical check. And so I go into the bedroom to get on the bed to do the cervical check, and I could not bring myself to lay on my back to get a proper cervical check like that. And that was kind of funny because the same thing happened whenever I came into the hospital with my second child. They were like, let's have you lay down and we'll do a cervical check. And I like contorted on the bed, like I'm trying to lay down and I can't. And the midwife at that time said, yeah, I can't tell how where the baby is, but you look like you're complete, so push when you're ready.
That's funny. Lindsay, that's kind of interesting thinking back because you said with your first birth that you pushed on your back for 2 hours. It
Mhm.
sounds almost like there's this thing now in labor where it's like, mm-mm, cannot be
Yeah.
on my back. Like that is not a safe place for my body
Mhm.
to be when I am in labor. That just caught my eye.
Yeah, it's interesting how those things affect you and stay with you for a long time, you know. So anyway, I ended up getting on all fours in kind of a transverse, perpendicular position on the bed, and John got on the other side of the bed directly facing me. Because that's how I really appreciate him most in labor. I want to hold on to him and look at him, because he's my strength through this. And so he's in front of me, and I'm on all fours, and she checks and she says, okay, the baby's head is right there. If you just get back in the water, I think she'll be out in just a few pushes. And just something in me, I just wasn't convinced. I just wasn't convinced. And as I'm saying to her, are you sure? I have this huge contraction. And I look at John right in his face. I just yell in his face, help me, I need help, please help me. And then the other midwife, not my main midwife, but the other midwife, Nicole, she kind of chuckles behind me and she's like, yeah, I think you're ready. And even at that time, once the contraction was over, I thought that was hilarious. Like, I laughed because this isn't my first birth. So I remembered right before I pushed the baby out, having a feeling of panic. And so I was like, "Oh, okay, good. I am ready. Okay." And so I shoved John back into the bathroom and basically jumped back into the tub. And I get on all fours because that's really the position that I had up to that point found most comfortable. And I'm in the water and I'm I'm scared. Like, I had torn with the previous two births, and here I am in the water. I need to be pushing, but I'm scared that I'm going to tear again. Nobody's yelling at me this time. And I'm like, okay, if I tear, there's nobody to blame but myself. And that was just kind of a scary feeling, to be completely honest. And I felt so safe in the setting. Like, everybody that was there to support me. They were there in whatever capacity that I needed them to be. I have these beautiful red Christmas lights, scripture cards. I have Phil Wickham's Christmas album playing on repeat on Spotify. It's a great setting. And here I am, almost paralyzed with fear about pushing because of these previous experiences. And the Lord knew that that was going to happen. And He had me place these scripture cards right in front of me where I was on all fours, right in front of me on that bathroom wall. I was looking at these scriptures, and the one that was right in front of me was 2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 10. And this is the passage where Paul is talking about the thorn in his side, which a lot of people believe is like a physical ailment that he had to deal with for a period of time. And about this, he says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities, for when I am weak, then I am strong. And I read that. And here I am in the tub with a baby ready to be born, and I'm not pushing yet because I feel weak and I feel scared. And I read that, and those words reminded me of the gospel that Jesus came and lived a perfect, sinless life and died for me so that his power could rest upon me and I could be saved from my sin. And I'm like, okay. And so I started pushing.
Wow.
And that was a very transformative moment not only in the labor for me, but in my life. That moment really, it forced me to surrender part of myself that I didn't realize I was even holding on to, you know. And so I'm so thankful for that, thankful that I experienced that fear and had to overcome that. And so I started pushing and I felt my water break, which was a really cool sensation to feel in the bathtub. I didn't know if I was going to be able to tell that my water had broken if I was in the tub, but I absolutely felt that pop. And I said out loud, "That was it, my water broke." And at this point, I'm on all fours still. And I did a few pushes like that. And then all of a sudden, I just had this really primal, instinctive feeling like I cannot be in this position anymore. And so I quickly shift into a squatting position and I push, and she's born.
Mm.
I just felt this like popping feeling, this breaking feeling, like I'm breaking free. And I look down and she drops into the water like a little fish. And
Oh.
she's looking up at me, eyes wide open, looking at me. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, hello." And so I scoop her out of the water and she immediately starts screaming. As soon as she breaks out of the water, she immediately starts screaming. And that was really fun for me because I had prepped myself that, water birth babies sometimes they're a little more chill. They might need a little help transitioning to life outside of the womb because it doesn't feel different, from the amniotic sac. But, not Isla Rose, not her. She was born screaming, and within just a couple of minutes, she was automatically like rooting and looking around to breastfeed. And so that was just, that was really wonderful. And two kind of unique things about the time that she was born. She was born at 6:41 in the morning. So that's exactly 5 hours from when I experienced my first contraction at 1:41 in the morning. And at about, I don't know, 4:30, whenever I was laboring in the tub, and I realized like this is definitely happening and I saw what time it was. One of the cards that I had written around the tub said, "There is no detail too small for God. Pray." And I prayed that she would be born before 7 in the morning so that my other two children could see me and her before leaving for the day. Because I knew, like, I had explained to them, Mama's gonna have the baby, and it's just kind of hard to prep a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old for that. And so I really wanted them to have the comfort and the experience of getting to see me before they left for the day. And then the second thing that was kind of cool about this is while I was pregnant, I was in a ladies' Bible study at my church. And at the end of the Bible study, we always pray for each other. And one of the ladies knew my story with my first daughter and how fast and scary the labor was. And so she's praying over me and she says, "Lord, we pray that Lindsay's labor would be smooth and go fast. Oh, but not too fast." And the Lord answered that prayer perfectly because 5 hours was a great amount of time for me to be able to transition through the different stages, to process what was happening, to enjoy parts of the labor, and then have the baby in enough time that didn't feel like it was dragging out. And my other kids got to see me before they left for the day. And so the Lord was just so gracious to me for answering those two prayers about the timing that she was born. And we kind of had like a phone tree of friends that would be there to support me on the day that she's born, like people that are basically on call for my other kids. And it's so funny. The first person that was on call to come and pick up my other two kids and take Elijah to school and keep Imogene for the day, one of her daughters had had nightmares that night, and so she left her bedroom and her phone in her bedroom and went and slept with her daughter. So at like 5:30 in the morning, John's calling her and she's not answering. And so he comes back into the bathroom with me and the midwives and he says, she's not answering. Is there anybody else that we can call?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, call Caitlin. She's got our second car seat. So she can probably help." And so he calls Caitlin and she answers on the first try. And she says, okay, don't worry about it. You go be with Lindsey. Somebody will be there at 7 to get your kids. And she did it. She wasn't the first person on call. And she, wasn't exactly prepared to be called. And within an hour of him calling her, there she was, standing in my bathroom with her own child, strapped to her chest in her baby carrier, there to help me with my other two children. And that's honestly one of my favorite memories of the labor and delivery because the village that I had always desired and prayed for was here for me. They were here for me. And actually, my first friend that didn't initially answer the phone, she realized what had happened. And she coordinated with Caitlin to pick up the kids, and she fed them dinner and took care of them that night, and then brought them back that evening. And so it was just a really wonderful experience. And then postpartum at home, I cannot tell you, Caitlin, how wonderful postpartum at home is compared to the hospital. Immediately postpartum, I got out of the tub, went to the bed to deliver the placenta, and I got cleaned up and settled to my own king size bed, not the tiny hospital bed. And there was a cold front that had just come in that morning. And so I was like all snuggled in to our bed with our newborn baby. And John and my midwife scrambled me some eggs. And my midwife warmed up some of my homemade chicken broth in a Christmas mug and brought it to me. And I was just like, this is what I prayed for. And the Lord did not have to immensely bless me with that experience, but he truly did. And I'm so thankful. So thankful.
Lindsay, this has just been the most enjoyable thing to listen to. Just whoa, what a story and what a beautiful outlook that you have in sharing it. Like it's not just the story, it's your perspective and the way that you have processed everything is just so delightful to listen to. And I know that the listeners are going to feel that when they hear it. There's just so much
Mhm.
beauty and so much joy and just happiness in this
Yeah.
experience. And it just fills me with delight. Um, Gosh, just how sweet too, just to have everything right in front of you that you needed. This
Mhm.
idea of, there is not a detail too small. Just
Yeah.
ask, just pray,
Mhm.
just ask
Yeah.
about it. And
Yeah.
and then seeing that unfold in real time, what a special experience. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, Lindsay. And also how sweet to have been listening to the podcast
Yes.
and to be able to share your story. And you know that there's going to be someone in the same place
Yes.
listening to your story as they're getting everything ready to have their baby.
Hmm.
I love the, as you said, full circle-ness
Yes.
of so many things. What another full circle moment for you to be here and for you to be able to share for another mom as she's preparing to go through the exact same thing. Lindsay, this has just been so enjoyable and just such a beautiful picture of what birth can be like. And as we round everything up here at the end, I'd love to just ask you, what is it that you want for listeners to take away from your birth experience?
Yeah, so, really taking a survey of my three very different experiences with my three pregnancies and labors, I see a big glaring difference between all three of them. And in my first pregnancy, everyone around me, from the obstetrician group that was taking care of me to even other mothers in my life, and friends were telling me, don't get too attached to the idea of having a natural birth. You can't control it. You don't need to do all this preparation or anything like that. Just go with the flow. You're not going to be able to control it anyway. And that was really discouraging for me. And so I kind of like halfway prepared for that first labor. And the preparation that I did was good. It allowed me to have an unmedicated birth, but there were so many things that if I had prepared better, I would have done them differently. And I could have avoided some of that trauma. And so I was just thinking about it and I was like, people often say whenever you're pregnant, the only thing that matters for your birth is a healthy baby and a healthy mom. And That I don't like that saying because we don't treat any other life event like that. Whenever you get married, you don't say, well, the only thing that matters is that you're getting married. You don't need to plan a wedding or anything like that. We don't treat that experience like this at all. You plan what you're going to wear and who's going to be there and what you eat and all of those things. And of course, most people's weddings don't go exactly how they planned, but they're still worth planning. And the most important thing at the end of the day is that you get married. Just like the most important thing at the end of the day, whenever you have a baby, is that the baby and you are healthy. But that doesn't mean the other aspects don't matter. They do matter. And my husband always says that failing to plan is planning to fail. And do the preparation that you need to do to have the birth that you want to have. And then when you go into labor, go into it with an open hand, knowing what's important to you. You've done the preparation, you have the people there that you're comfortable with that are advocating for you, but you're willing to roll with it. You're willing to surrender it to God, and it'll be beautiful. Whatever happens, it will be used in your life for your good. But you did everything that you could to prep. And so I really want people to not get discouraged by anyone in their life that's saying, oh, don't make a birth plan, don't prep. Don't listen to them. Push them to the side. Don't make the mistake I made. Do the preparation that you need to do. So,
Wow, such solid advice. Lindsay, I can't wait until you have your own podcast. I'll be your first subscriber, number one fan. So good. Gosh, oh my goodness, Lindsay. It has been such an honor. Thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Wow, what an episode. Let's go ahead and jump into this week's episode tidbit. So, in this episode, we heard about several different pushing experiences, and I want to share a little more about pushing. Now, there are many different ways to push on all fours, on your side, kneeling, squatting, in a lunge. You can do it here, you can do it there, you can do it in a house, you can do it with a mouse. Anyway, depending on the position of the baby, the shape of your pelvis, and so much more, you may be drawn to a certain pushing position. I want you to know that you can listen to the urgings of your body. If hands and knees had been serving you for all of your labor, but suddenly here at the end you feel a need to flip over into a reclined squat, do it. Your body and baby are working together, and so often the movement you feel called to is the movement that needs to happen to help them through the birthing canal. Inside of Happy Home Birth Academy, I introduce you to all kinds of different birthing positions for early labor, active labor, and for pushing. Many moms find it useful to practice getting into these positions before entering labor so that the body feels them as familiar, not unknown. If you're ready to prepare in this way, click the link in the show notes to sign up. Let's jump into this week's episode roundup. Man, Lindsay was just so full of insight. So, we're actually going to use her own words for this week's episode roundup. Number 1, reject the naysayers. Prepare fully for the birth that you desire. Don't fall into the trap of fearing, quote, failure so much that you don't commit to preparation. Of course, birth can go a million different ways, but when you do what you can on your end to prepare, you'll be served and more ready for however it unfolds. Next, surrender. Surrender your birth. Once you've prepared, it's time to surrender. The beautiful gift of birth is that no matter what, it can be a teacher. It can provide you with the most valuable lessons. And it's so much less about the specific events that happen to you and so much more about how you're able to process and integrate those events into your motherhood experience. And finally, I just want to emphasize something that happened to Lindsay. In her most recent birth, she experienced a pivotal moment. She realized that she was holding on to control in areas that she'd never noticed before, not only in this birth, but in life. This birth, this very moment in birth, gave her an opportunity to break down an entire stronghold in her life. It allowed her to rewire a part of her brain. This, my friends, is the beauty that is held in the birthing process. This is what I mean when I say that yes, home birth is great, but it's not the whole story. Home birth is the car that can drive you to a destination of new revelation, just like it did with Lindsey. Okay, my friends, that was just a blast. It's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.